Ethan Cole walked the wide desert with the slow steps of a man who had no real destination. The Arizona sky stretched above him, a burning canvas of orange and gold as the sun dipped low behind the ridges. His boots were worn from endless miles of dust and rock, his hat pulled low to shade tired eyes. Every scar on his body told a story from his past, though he rarely spoke of them. People who had crossed his path called him a drifter, some called him a loner, and a few whispered about the battles he had fought long ago as a soldier. To Ethan, those scars were not just marks of pain. They were reminders of why he kept moving. He wanted peace, though peace never seemed to want him. He carried only the basics, a rifle slung across his back, a knife at his belt, a canteen strapped to his saddle. His horse, a tall chestnut mare, was his only true companion. Together they roamed the edge of civilization where towns were small, danger was large, and the law often meant very little. Ethan thought this stretch of canyon would be quiet, a place to camp for the night, to rest by a fire and let the silence of the desert soothe him. But life had a way of surprising him when he least expected it. That evening, as shadows lengthened and the desert began to cool, Ethan set down his bedroll near a cluster of rocks. He gathered some dry brush, striking flint against steel until sparks caught, and soon a small flame flickered against the darkening world. He leaned back against the stone, letting the warmth soak into him, when he heard something unusual. It was faint at first, soft, hurried whispers carried by the wind. His hand instinctively moved toward his knife, but he stayed still, listening closer. The whispers weren't the harsh tones of outlaws plotting. They were lighter, trembling as if belonging to frightened children. Ethan rose silently, every movement careful, his eyes scanning the desert floor. The sound came again, this time clearer. A small gasp, then the rustle of feet scrambling against gravel. He turned toward a cluster of mesquite bushes and stepped lightly. When he reached them, he crouched, speaking softly. "I hear you," he said in a calm voice. "No need to be scared." Two pairs of wide eyes stared back at him from the shadows of the brush. They were young, no more than 9 or 10 years old, their dark hair tangled, their faces streaked with dust and fear. A boy and a girl. They pressed closer together, clutching one another's hands as if to draw strength. The boy's chin trembled, but he tried to look brave. The girl's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. Ethan slowly set down his knife on the ground, palms open to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said gently. "My name's Ethan, I won't hurt you." The boy swallowed hard, then spoke in halting English. We are hiding. Bad men are chasing us." Ethan frowned, scanning the horizon. "Bad men? How many?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Many, too many." She pointed back toward the canyon trail. "They took our mother. They will come for us." Ethan felt a chill, not from the desert air but from the fear in their voices. He studied them carefully. Their clothing was simple buckskin, their beads and hair ties marked with Apache symbols. He realized then who they were, children of the Apache, the proud people who had lived in these lands long before men like Santiago Cruz or other raiders tried to take them. "What are your names?" Ethan asked. "Dakota," the boy said, squaring his shoulders though his voice shook. "Nita," the girl added softly. Ethan nodded. "Dakota, Nita, where was your mother taken?" The boy looked down, shame filling his face. "She told us to run. She said she would stop them. But they caught her." His small hands clenched into fists. "There are 30 men. Santiago leads them. He wants her." "He hates her." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had heard the name before. Santiago Cruz. A cruel bandit chief who terrorized the border, known for his brutality and greed. A man like that would not stop until he had destroyed whatever stood in his path. Ethan looked at the children again. Alone, they would not last a day in this desert, not with Cruz and his 30 men searching for them. Ethan let out a slow breath, knowing the choice before him. He could walk away, pretend he never saw them. It would be easier, safer. He had always kept his life separate, never tying himself to anyone's fate. But something in the children's eyes, something desperate, something pure, stirred a part of him he thought long buried. He saw the fear, yes, but also courage. They had run because their mother commanded it, not because they wished to. They had obeyed, trusting her love even when it left them alone. That kind of courage deserved protection. "You're safe with me," Ethan said firmly. "I'll get you to your mother. But you'll need to trust me, same as you trusted her." The boy and girl looked at one another, then back at Ethan. Slowly, they nodded. Ethan offered his hand. Dakota hesitated, then placed his small hand in Ethan's. Nita followed, clinging tightly to her brother's arm as they stepped out of the brush. Ethan led them back toward his fire. He gave them water from his canteen, tore pieces of dried meat from his pack, and handed it to them. They ate quickly, their hunger obvious. As the stars spread across the desert sky, Ethan sat with the children beside the fire. He asked them about their mother. They told him her name was Ayoka, a woman strong in spirit, respected among their people. She had once stood against Santiago Cruz when he tried to claim Apache land, and ever since he had sworn vengeance. That vengeance had arrived with smoke and fire when the bandits raided their village. Ethan listened quietly, every word weighing heavy in his mind. He had seen cruelty like this before too many times. He knew what men like Cruz were capable of, and the thought of a woman and her people being crushed under his power stirred something inside him, something close to anger. When the children's eyes grew heavy with exhaustion, Ethan told them to rest. He spread his blanket across the ground and let them curl up beside the fire, keeping watch as they drifted into uneasy sleep. Ethan stayed awake long after, staring into the flames. The desert around him was alive with silence, but he knew it would not last. The bandits would be hunting already, their tracks leading them here. He could almost hear their laughter, see the glint of their knives in the moonlight. 30 men against one scarred drifter, it was madness. And yet, as he looked at the children sleeping close together, Ethan knew he would not walk away. He touched the scar that ran across his cheek, remembering battles fought long ago, the friends he had lost, the pain he carried. He had survived when others had not, and he often wondered why. Tonight he thought he might finally have his answer. Perhaps those scars had brought him here, to this place, to protect these children. Perhaps this was why he was still walking the earth. When the fire burned low, Ethan quietly saddled his horse, ready to move at first light. He knew the desert trails better than most, and he would need every skill he had to keep the children safe. Cruz and his men would come, and when they did, Ethan would be waiting. As the first hint of dawn colored the horizon, Ethan looked once more at Dakota and Nita. They stirred awake, their young faces filled with worry. Ethan gave them a reassuring nod. "Stay close to me," he told them. "No matter what happens, don't let go." And with that, the man who had once wandered without purpose now had a path. It was a path marked by danger, by blood, and perhaps by death. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan knew why he walked it. He walked it for the twins. He walked it for their mother. And deep down he walked it for himself, for the chance to finally fight for something that truly mattered. The desert morning was quiet, but Ethan Cole knew better than to trust the silence. Behind every still shadow could be danger, and every gust of wind carried the scent of dust raised by riders. Santiago Cruz's men would not give up easily, not when the children of Ayoka were involved. Ethan felt it in his bones, the same way he had once felt danger on battlefields long ago. Dakota and Nita walked beside him, their small feet quick to keep up with his steady stride. The boy tried hard to look strong, shoulders back, jaw tight, though Ethan could see the fear flicker across his eyes every time a rock cracked beneath his boot. Nita stayed close to her brother, clinging to his hand while her other hand gripped the side of Ethan's saddle, as if the horse itself could shield her from the world. They followed the canyon trail, winding through tall red cliffs that rose like walls on either side. The narrow passage offered both safety and risk. On one hand, the rock would hide them from the distant view of riders. On the other, it meant there was no quick escape if the bandits closed in. Ethan kept his rifle slung across his chest, his eyes scanning the ridges above. He had told the children little of what lay ahead. It was not to frighten them, but to keep them calm. Instead, he asked them small questions as they walked. He asked about their village, about the games they played, about the songs their mother sang. Their answers came slowly at first, quiet voices filled with hesitation. But soon Nita smiled faintly when she spoke of her mother's stories of eagles and rivers. Dakota spoke of hunting rabbits with his small bow. These pieces of their life reminded them who they were, and for a short time, the desert did not feel so heavy. But soon the calm was broken. Ethan heard it before the children did, the distant crack of a gunshot echoing through the canyon. It was not aimed at them, but it was close enough to send a warning. The twins froze in fear, eyes wide, clutching each other. Ethan crouched low, pulling them beside him, his voice steady. "They're not on us yet," he said, "but they're close. We have to move faster." He lifted Nita onto his horse, letting her hold the saddle horn. Dakota walked beside them, determined not to show weakness. Ethan guided them along, every sense on edge. He looked for signs of the pursuers. Hoofprints in the dust, smoke from campfires, broken branches on the trail. They were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs. The bandits were tracking, and they were not far behind. By midday, the sun burned overhead, making the canyon walls shimmer in waves of heat. The children grew tired, their steps slowing, but Ethan pushed them on. He knew stopping for too long meant death. When Nita grew too weary, Ethan lifted her onto the horse behind him, letting her lean against his back. The girl's small hands clung to him, trembling but steadying with his strength. Dakota, though exhausted, refused to ask for rest. His jaw was set, his eyes fierce. Ethan admired the boy's spirit, but he also worried. Courage was good, but it could not outpace 30 armed men. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan's mind turned to strategy. 30 bandits were not just a number. They were a force. He had seen what 30 men with rifles could do. He could not fight them head-on, not yet. He needed to keep moving, to choose the ground carefully, to use the desert as his ally. The canyons, the cliffs, the narrow trails. These would give him the edge. He found a dry riverbed where the sand had hardened into cracked plates. The ground there left no clear tracks. He led the children down into it, brushing away what few prints remained behind them with a branch. They followed the bed for nearly a mile before climbing back onto rocky ground where the bandits would have to guess which way they had gone. Still, Ethan knew it would not buy them much time. Cruz's men were not fools. They had hunted before. They would keep searching until they found some sign. The question was not if, but when. That evening, as the sun began to sink, Ethan found a shallow cave in the side of a cliff. It was hidden by brush and shadow, large enough for the horse and the children to rest inside. He led them in quietly, making sure no tracks gave away their path. The twins sat against the stone, weary and frightened, their small bodies trembling from exhaustion. Ethan knelt before them, his voice firm but calm. "You both did well today," he said. "You were strong. Your mother would be proud." Nita's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Dakota sat taller, though his voice cracked when he asked, "Will we see her again?" Ethan looked into the boy's eyes, seeing not just fear but hope. He could not lie, not to them. "We'll try with everything we have," he said. "I'll get you to her. But you must trust me every step." The children nodded solemnly. That night, Ethan did not sleep. He kept watch at the cave mouth, his rifle across his knees. The desert night was alive with sounds. The distant howl of a coyote, the chirp of insects, the whisper of wind through stone. Each noise made him tense, but it was the silence between those sounds that worried him most. He imagined Cruz's men out there in the dark, spreading across the canyon like wolves, searching, sniffing, circling closer. In the deep hours of night, Ethan heard it, the soft crack of a twig, faint but certain. He pressed a finger to his lips and motioned for the children to stay silent. He crept to the edge of the brush and peered out. In the distance, shadows moved. Riders, their outlines just visible against the moonlit sand. They were searching. Ethan's heart thudded, but he stayed still. The riders passed, their torches glowing faintly before disappearing into the canyon bend. He let out a slow breath, returning to the cave. The children had not moved, their wide eyes fixed on him, trusting him. By dawn, the bandits were still close. Ethan knew he could not keep running forever. He thought about the scars on his body, the fights he had survived, the battles he had endured. Every mark was a story of survival, but this time it was not just his life at stake. These children depended on him, and perhaps their whole people would depend on what happened next. As the morning light grew, Ethan prepared to move again. He tightened the saddle straps, filled the canteen from a trickle of water he found near the rocks, and gave the children pieces of dried food. They ate quickly, understanding now that time was precious. They stepped back onto the trail, heading deeper into the desert where the cliffs narrowed once more. Ethan knew this ground. He knew it well enough to make a choice. If Cruz's men wanted to take these children, they would have to bleed for it. He looked back at Dakota and Nita, their tired faces filled with both fear and courage. Then he looked ahead, toward the canyon where he would make his stand. The chase could not last forever. Sooner or later it would come to blood and fire, and Ethan Cole was ready. The canyon lay still under the cover of night, its walls rising like silent giants against the star-filled sky. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of dust and sage. Ethan Cole crouched low among the rocks, his eyes fixed on the narrow pass below. This was where it had to happen. He could not run anymore. The bandits were too many and the children were too tired. If Santiago Cruz wanted them, he would have to pay dearly. Dakota and Nita huddled deeper in the shadows of a stone outcrop, their small faces pale in the dim light of the moon. Ethan had told them to stay quiet no matter what they heard. He had knelt beside them before the waiting began, his rough hand resting on their shoulders, his voice low and steady. "You must be brave," he had said. "Do not cry out no matter what happens, trust me. I'll protect you." The boy nodded, swallowing hard, while Nita clutched her brother's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. They both understood more than children their age should have to, yet they held themselves with the quiet strength of their mother's people. Ethan moved back to his place behind the rocks. He checked his rifle, making sure the chamber was ready. He touched the handle of his knife sheathed at his belt. He felt every scar on his body throb as if preparing him for what was to come. 30 men were too many for any one man to face, but he had chosen this ground carefully. The canyon was narrow, the walls steep. Here, numbers would mean less. Here, his skill and willpower might be enough. The sound of hoofbeats broke the silence, at first faint, then louder, echoing through the canyon like thunder. Ethan's jaw tightened. The bandits were coming. He could hear their laughter, their voices carried by the night. They rode with confidence, certain of their power, certain that nothing could stand in their way. Torches glowed in the distance, orange flames flickering against the rock walls. Shadows danced ahead of the riders, long and crooked, as if the canyon itself carried warning of what was coming. Ethan steadied his breathing, his eyes narrowing. He waited. The first riders entered the narrow pass, their horses snorting as they slowed to pick their way across the uneven ground. Ethan aimed carefully, his finger tightening on the trigger. When the lead rider's silhouette filled his sights, he fired. The crack of the rifle exploded through the canyon. The rider fell, his torch tumbling to the sand. The horse reared and chaos erupted. Before the others could react, Ethan fired again, his second shot finding another target. The bandits shouted, some dismounting, some scrambling for cover. Torches flared as they swung them wildly, trying to see the source of the attack. Ethan dropped back behind the rocks, reloading quickly. Bullets struck the stone around him, sending sparks and chips of rock into the air. He waited until he saw the glow of another torch, then leaned out, fired, and dropped another man. He moved like a shadow, never staying in one place for long. The canyon filled with gunfire, the noise deafening, the smell of powder thick in the air. Horses screamed and bolted, adding to the confusion. Ethan fought with the calm focus of a man who had lived through too many battles. He counted each shot, each reload, each breath. But the bandits were many and their anger was fierce. They pushed forward, firing into the shadows, calling out to one another. Santiago Cruz's voice rose above the chaos, harsh and commanding. "Find him. Burn him out if you have to. The children are close. Take them alive." Ethan's blood burned at those words. He would die before he let them near the twins. The bandits tried to climb the canyon walls, seeking higher ground. Ethan anticipated them. He slipped through the rocks, silent as a ghost, and struck before they could get their footing. His knife flashed in the moonlight, swift and precise, before he vanished again into shadow. One by one, the attackers fell. But with each victory, Ethan paid a price. A bullet grazed his arm, leaving blood dark against his sleeve. Another clipped his side, searing pain through his ribs. He gritted his teeth, refusing to slow. He had faced death before, but tonight he fought not just for himself. He fought for Dakota and Nita. The battle stretched on, the night echoing with shouts, gunfire, and the clash of steel. Ethan moved with desperate determination, every muscle straining, every scar burning. He had become part of the canyon itself, its stone, its shadow, its unyielding will. Hours seemed to pass in moments. Bodies littered the canyon floor, torches burning low beside them. The bandits' numbers dwindled, but still they came, driven by Cruz's rage. At last, Santiago himself entered the fight. A tall man with a broad chest and cold eyes, he carried himself with the arrogance of one who had always taken what he wanted. He dismounted, rifle in hand, and shouted into the canyon, "Show yourself, Cole. You cannot kill us all." "No man can." Ethan, bleeding and weary, rose from the rocks, his rifle steady despite the pain. His voice carried clear through the night. "Maybe not all," he said, "but enough." The two men faced each other in the torchlight, the canyon floor littered with the fallen. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the silence shattered as both raised their weapons. The exchange was swift, thunder rolling between the cliffs. Ethan's shot struck true and Santiago staggered back, dropping his rifle. His eyes widened with shock before he fell to the ground, the torchlight flickering over his still form. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader fall and their numbers broken, fled into the darkness. Their shouts faded into the distance, leaving only the crackle of dying torches and the rasp of Ethan's heavy breathing. When the last echo faded, Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from exhaustion and blood loss. He had done it. Against all odds, he had stood against 30 men and lived. The canyon was silent again, but it was a silence carved by fire and death. Dakota and Nita emerged from the shadows, their faces pale but their eyes wide with awe. They ran to him, dropping to their knees beside him. The boy placed his small hand on Ethan's arm, while Nita clung to his shoulder, whispering his name through tears. Ethan managed a faint smile, his voice rough. "It's all right now. You're safe." The children held him close, their small forms pressed against his scarred body. For Ethan, the battle was over, but the scars it left, both new and old, would stay with him forever. And yet, as he looked at the children alive and unharmed, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt that the pain, the blood, and the scars were worth it. The night stretched on, the stars shining down on the canyon floor where a lone man had faced an army for the sake of 2 children. And though his body ached with every breath, Ethan Cole knew this night would never be forgotten. Not by him, and not by the children whose lives he had saved. The first light of dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of gold and red, but Ethan Cole barely noticed. He sat slumped against a boulder, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. His body ached in every place where bullet, blade, and fist had struck him. His shirt was torn and stained, his skin marked with fresh wounds to join the old scars he already carried. He had survived the night, though at times he doubted he would. Around him, the canyon floor was silent except for the occasional groan of a dying horse and the whisper of the wind. Dakota and Nita stayed close, their small hands never leaving his arms. They had refused to rest even as exhaustion pulled at their eyes. They looked at Ethan with a mixture of fear and awe, unable to believe that one man had stood against so many and still drawn breath. For them, Ethan was no longer just a drifter who had found them. He was now their shield, their warrior, the one who had carried them through the night. Ethan's vision blurred as he tried to stay awake. He had forced his body to fight beyond reason, and now it was paying the price. His head tilted back against the rock, and he wondered if this was where his story might end. A quiet part of him accepted it. He had done what needed to be done. The children were alive. That to him was enough. But fate had more to give. A sound drifted across the canyon, soft at first, then stronger, the rhythmic beat of hooves, the calls of voices carried by the morning wind. Dakota's head lifted sharply. Nita gasped, clutching Ethan's sleeve. Ethan tried to rise, his hand moving toward his rifle, but his strength failed. The children leaned forward, straining to see. Out of the canyon's far end came a group of riders, their figures framed by the rising sun. Their ponies moved with speed and grace, their clothing marked by feathers and beadwork that glimmered faintly in the light. The Apache had come. At their front rode a tall woman, her dark hair flowing loose down her back, her eyes sharp as an eagle's. She carried herself with the strength of one who had endured much and yielded little. Even from a distance, Dakota and Nita recognized her. Their cries rose together, filled with joy. "Mother!" The woman, Ahyoka, urged her horse forward, her heart pounding as she saw her children alive. She slid from the saddle before it had even stopped, running across the canyon floor with arms outstretched. Dakota and Nita ran to her, colliding against her with tears streaming down their cheeks. She dropped to her knees, gathering them close, kissing their foreheads, holding them as if she would never let go again. "My little ones," she whispered in Apache, her voice breaking. "You are safe. You are safe." The warriors behind her spread out, their eyes scanning the carnage that littered the ground. They saw the bodies of Cruz's men, the torches burned out, the tracks of battle carved deep into the earth. They exchanged looks of astonishment. They had not believed any man could have stood against so many. Ayoka's gaze lifted from her children, drawn to the figure slumped against the boulder. Her heart tightened when she saw Ethan, bloodied and scarred, his rifle still across his lap, though his strength was gone. She rose slowly, her children still clutching her hands, and walked to him. Ethan forced his eyes open, struggling to focus. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming as he saw her approach, tall and proud, framed by the light of morning. Then her shadow fell across him, and he realized it was real. "You are Ayoka," he rasped, his voice raw. She knelt beside him, her eyes softening, though her voice held the weight of her people's strength. "And you are the man who saved my children." Ethan tried to shake his head. "I did what I had to. No one else would." Ayoka reached out, her hand pressing gently against the wound at his side. He flinched, but her touch was steady, careful. She whispered words in Apache, blessings older than the canyon walls themselves. The children knelt beside her, watching Ethan with wide, hopeful eyes. "You fought 30 men, she said, her voice low with wonder. "Alone, for children who were not your own. Why?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, searching for the words. His voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "Because they needed me. Because no one should face men like that alone. Because they're worth more than my scars." Silence fell, heavy with meaning. Ayoka looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just the scars on his body but the weight of years carried in his eyes. She saw the pain, the loneliness, and the strength that had carried him here. Her people moved closer, some dismounting to help. They lifted Ethan carefully, laying him across a blanket that could be carried between horses. He tried to protest, but his voice was weak. Ayoka silenced him with a glance. "You will not die here," she said firmly. "You will come with us. You will be honored as a warrior." Dakota and Nita clung to Ethan's hands as the warriors prepared to move, their mother's arms wrapped around them, yet still they looked at Ethan as though afraid to let him go. The journey back to the Apache camp was slow. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, the steady rhythm of hooves lulling him into a half-sleep. Each time his eyes opened, he saw Ayoka riding beside him, her gaze strong and watchful. Her children pressed close against her. He wondered how a woman so fierce could still carry such gentleness in her eyes. When they reached the camp, the people gathered, their voices rising in surprise and reverence. They saw the children safe, their mother returned, and the stranger who bore the marks of battle. Whispers spread quickly. 30 men defeated, one drifter standing in their path. Some called it impossible, others called it a gift from the spirits. The elders came forward, their faces solemn, their hands raised in blessing. They looked at Ethan with deep respect. In their eyes, scars were not a shame but proof of courage. His wounds were not just wounds. They were the marks of sacrifice. Ayoka guided him into her own lodge, laying him on a bed of soft hides. She worked quickly with herbs and poultices, her hands steady, her eyes filled with determination. Ethan tried to speak, but she pressed a hand against his chest, silencing him. "Rest," she said. "You have carried enough." Dakota and Nita sat nearby, never leaving his side. They told their mother everything. How Ethan had found them, how he had guided them through the desert, how he had stood alone in the canyon and faced the bandits. Their voices rose with excitement, their eyes shining with pride. Ayoka listened, her gaze moving back to Ethan again and again. When the children finished, she touched his hand lightly. "You saved more than my children," she said softly. "You saved a mother's heart. You saved a people's hope." Ethan closed his eyes, too weary to reply, but her words sank deep into him. For years he had wandered, carrying only his scars and his solitude. Now, lying here among people who honored him, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt belonging. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars shone above the camp, the Apache sang songs of thanks. They sang of the drifter who had fought like a warrior, who had spilled his blood for children not his own. Ethan lay half awake, the voices wrapping around him like a blanket, and for the first time in many years he felt peace. Ethan Cole woke to the sound of children's laughter. For a moment he thought he was dreaming, because for many years laughter had been something distant in his life, something he only remembered from long ago when his world was different. But when he opened his eyes, he saw Dakota and Nita just outside the lodge, chasing one another in the morning sun. Their voices were light and free, no longer weighed down by fear. Ethan tried to sit up, but his body reminded him of the battle with every throb and ache. His side burned where the bullet had grazed him, his arm stiff where another had cut deep. Yet he was alive. He could move. He could breathe. Each breath hurt, but it was proof that he had not been taken from this world yet. The lodge was quiet except for the rustle of hides at the entrance. Ayoka stepped inside, carrying a clay bowl filled with herbs steeped in warm water. Her dark eyes met his, and for a moment silence stretched between them. She knelt beside him, dipping a cloth into the mixture and pressed it gently against his wounds. "You are healing," she said in her calm, steady voice. Ethan managed a faint smile. "Feels more like breaking, but I'll take your word for it." Her lips curved slightly, though her eyes stayed serious. "Healing takes time. The body must rest and the spirit must rest too." Ethan let his head fall back, closing his eyes as her hands worked. She was gentle but firm, as though she had done this many times before. The scent of herbs filled the air, sharp and earthy, mixing with the smoke of the fire outside. He realized then that she had sat by him many nights, tending his wounds when he could not move, keeping him anchored between this world and the next. Days passed slowly. Ethan grew stronger, though his steps were still heavy and his scars fresh. The Apache welcomed him into their daily life. The children often visited his side, bringing him water or small gifts they had made. A carved feather from Dakota, a string of beads from Nita. They treated him as though he had always been part of them, as though his battle in the canyon had bound him to their hearts forever. Ethan watched them, and something inside him softened. For years he had carried only loneliness. He had walked with ghosts, with memories of wars and faces long gone. But here, among these people, there was no judgment, no demand for his past. They saw only what he had done for the children, and they honored him for it. One evening, the camp gathered for a feast. The air was filled with the smell of roasting meat, the beat of drums, the rhythm of voices rising in song. Ethan sat near the fire, his body still sore but his spirit lifted by the warmth of the gathering. The Apache sang of courage, of survival, of warriors who gave everything for others. They sang of him. He shifted uncomfortably, unused to being the center of honor. But when he looked across the fire and saw Dakota and Nita dancing with the other children, their laughter ringing out, he felt the weight ease. If his scars were the price for their joy, then the songs were not about him. They were about what had been saved. Later that night, Ayoka sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She was quiet for a long while before speaking. "You carry many scars," she said softly. "Not just on your body. Here too." She touched her hand lightly against his chest. "Scars of the heart." Ethan stared into the flames. "I suppose that's true. I lost a lot in my life. People I cared for, places I called home. After that, I just kept walking. It was easier than staying anywhere." "And now?" she asked. He thought for a long time. "Now, I'm not sure. But for the first time in years, I don't feel like running." Her gaze lingered on him, searching his face. Then she nodded as though she understood more than words could explain. The days turned into weeks. Ethan's strength returned, his wounds closing, leaving behind new scars to join the old. But these scars felt different. They were not marks of meaningless battles fought for causes long forgotten. They were reminders of a night that had mattered, of lives saved, of something greater than himself. He began to help in the camp, repairing saddles, carrying water, teaching the older boys how to steady a rifle. He was no Apache by birth, but the people welcomed his hands, his knowledge, and his quiet presence. Dakota followed him often, eager to learn, while Nita liked to sit beside him and braid beads into his hair, laughing when he pretended to be annoyed. Slowly, without him realizing it, they became more than children he had saved. They became his family. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of purple and gold, Ayoka approached him once more. She stood tall, her face strong, her eyes deep with meaning. "My people see you as one of us now," she said. "Not as a stranger, not as a drifter. You are a warrior who has earned his place." Ethan shifted, uneasy with praise. "I didn't do it for honor, I couldn't let them take the children. And that is why you are honored," she replied. "You fought without thought of yourself. That is the way of true courage." She paused, her gaze holding his. "You have no home of your own, Ethan Cole. You wander because you think the world has no place for you. But here you have a place, with us, with me, With my children. Her words struck him deeper than any wound. For so long he had believed his life was nothing more than walking from one horizon to the next, carrying scars no one wanted to see. But now someone offered him something greater, a home, a family, a reason to stop running. He looked at her, at Dakota and Nita playing nearby, their laughter echoing across the camp. Slowly a smile touched his lips, small but real. Maybe, he said quietly, maybe it's time I stop wandering. Ayoka reached out, her hand resting over his. Her touch was firm, steady, filled with unspoken promise. Then stay, she said. Your scars are not a burden here. They are the proof of who you are, and we honor them. We honor you. Ethan felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders. The loneliness, the emptiness, the endless wandering, all of it seemed to fade beneath her words. For the first time in a long, long time, he felt whole. That night, as he lay under the stars, Dakota curled at one side and Nita at the other, Ethan Cole realized the truth. His life had been shaped by scars, but those scars had led him here, to a place where he was no longer a drifter, no longer just a man with a broken past. He was part of a family, part of a people who saw his worth not in what he had lost, but in what he had given. The reward Ayoka spoke of was not gold, nor land, nor title. It was something far greater. It was belonging. It was love. It was a life worth living. And as the fire burned low and the desert night stretched wide around them, Ethan Cole closed his eyes, finally at peace, knowing every scar had been worth it.